Now, as the name of the video implies, this is going to be the first part of a story, and just like with my last one, new parts will be up every Tuesday until it's done, though I have no idea how many parts there will be in the end. And if you're wondering what the premise is for this what if story, well, I actually tried to take a few different ideas from people and merge them into one story. As for what is the initial change that led to all this, well, that's actually going to be revealed in time, though you might be able to figure it out right after this first episode. Anyway, without any further ado, let's start this story. We find ourselves watching The Phantom Menace, and we've come to almost the end of the movie, where we're in the hangar bay on Naboo in the city of Theed, and Qui-Gon is pointing at Anakin and telling him to stay in that cockpit, as everyone else approaches the massive set of double doors. And you're now ready to hear Duel of the Fates begin, as the doors slide open to reveal Darth Maul. Only the doors open, and not only does that iconic music not start, but there's no Darth Maul. So instead of taking the long way, we watch as Padme, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and all the others quickly and easily make their way to the control room, encountering only a few droids along the way, before they get there and capture Nute Gunray, who, after only a little bit of pressure, agrees to deactivate the droid army and surrender. And after some scenes of joyous celebration from all around Naboo, where the battle droids have simply shut down, we come to a scene of the hangar bay, where a bored and impatient looking Anakin is still just sitting in the cockpit of the yellow Nubian N1 starfighter, just as all the other ships begin to return from the battle in space above. And as the pilots get out of their ships, a few of them spot Anakin and tell him to get out of there, that that's no place for a child, to which Anakin replies that he's a pilot, and he could have helped had he been up there, which only causes the other pilots to chuckle and shake their heads. Angry, Anakin looks like he's about to say something to them, but that's when Qui-Gon shows up and waves for Anakin to come down. And as he helps the boy down from the ship, Qui-Gon says to him, "Do not be too eager for glory, Anakin. One day it will no doubt be you up there saving the day. And when it is, you must remember the path of the Jedi is one of humility, not praise and recognition. If cheering crowds and fame are what you seek, then perhaps I shall take you to Malastare, where you can continue your pod racing career, because the life of a Jedi will not suit you." Anakin quickly shakes his head and says, "No sir, I loved racing pods, and I'll miss doing it, but being a Jedi is what I know I'm supposed to be." Qui-Gon smiles, nods, and pats him on the head. "And when I'm allowed to train you, Anakin, you will understand why you must let go of these things you love." Anakin's little face wrinkles in confusion. "But why do I have to stop loving my mother?" Qui-Gon shakes his head and crouches to Anakin's level before he says, "No, Anakin, you do not have to stop loving her, not now or ever. But love is not about control. It is about freedom, and letting the ones we care about follow their destinies and become who they are meant to be. Your mother understood this, and this is why you are here now, following your path, instead of still a slave on Tatooine." Anakin still looks confused and says, "But why can't we just go back and free her too?" Qui-Gon offers Anakin a sympathetic smile and says, "We cannot control your mother's fate, Anakin. We can only follow the will of the Force, and trust in it that it will lead your mother to find freedom another way." Anakin, looking more confused than ever, then says, "But aren't Jedi supposed to help people?" Qui-Gon nods and says, "Yes, Anakin, and we do, but the galaxy is a very large place, and in it there are many people who need our help, but we cannot save them all. We can only let the Force guide us to those who need us the most." Anakin shakes his head and begins, "But my mother really needs us and—" Qui-Gon interrupts him and says, "You must trust me, Anakin. In time, I will see to it that you understand everything, and that you become the Jedi you were meant to be." We're then taken to a very familiar looking scene from The Phantom Menace, and watch as a smiling Palpatine is disembarking from his ship and going up to Queen Amidala to congratulate her on how her boldness has saved their people, to which she congratulates him on being elected the new Supreme Chancellor. Palpatine then thanks both Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan before he walks away, going right past young Anakin without so much as a word or even a glance. We're then taken into the palace on Naboo in yet another very familiar looking scene, this time like the one where Obi-Wan and Yoda are discussing the fate of Anakin, but now it is instead Yoda and Qui-Gon discussing that fate, and we hear Yoda say, "So certain are you that this boy is the chosen one?" Qui-Gon gives one firm nod of the head. "My finding him was the will of the Force. Of this I have no doubt." Yoda seems to think on that for a moment before saying, "Coincidence. This boy comes to us when the Sith may have returned. It is not." Qui-Gon looks relieved and says, "So, I will be allowed to train him then." But Yoda shakes his head. "No, another we will find to take the boy on as a Padawan." Qui-Gon looks surprised and maybe even a little bit angry as he said, "No, Master, it must be me that trains Anakin." Yoda's eyes then go wide. "Oh, trust your fellow Jedi with this? You do not?" Qui-Gon shakes his head. "It's not that, Master. I simply feel that there was a reason I found him, and that is because I am meant to train him." Yoda lets out a sigh. "Forbid a second apprentice, the code does, and ready for the trials, Obi-Wan is not." Qui-Gon without hesitation replies, "Then I will leave the order and train Anakin." Yoda eyes Qui-Gon keenly for a long moment before saying, "Mean this much to you, it does, hmm?" Qui-Gon shakes his head. "No, Master, it has nothing to do with what I want. I am only following the will of the Force, and what surprises me is that you and the rest of the Council are failing to see that as well." Yoda grunts and makes a face, as if he can't believe Qui-Gon could be so bold, but his expression quickly softens, and again he thinks quietly for a long moment before saying, "Your apprentice, Skywalker will be, and face the trials, Obi-Wan shall." We now switch scenes and get a shot of the industrial district on Coruscant before we see Darth Maul's ship, the Scimitar, and we follow it as it enters a hangar bay and lands as a dark-robed figure looks on. Soon, the ship's ramp is lowering and we see Darth Maul disembark, approach the dark figure, and fall to one knee and lower his head. He then says, "I return to you, my master, as you have instructed." We now get a closer look at the dark robe figure and see it is indeed Palpatine, or Darth Sidious if you prefer, who snarls and says, "I did not instruct for you to return to me as a coward who would not face and destroy two feeble Jedi." Maul hesitantly looks up, confusion on his face. "My master, I received your message at the last moment not to engage the Jedi on Naboo, that you had something else in mind. I only did as you instructed." Sidious snarls again. "The last message I sent to you was to destroy the Jedi and stop Queen Amidala, and yet you failed to do either." Maul shakes his head. "No, master, But Sidious cuts him off. "Perhaps I was wrong about you. Perhaps you are not as strong as I thought. Perhaps you fear the Jedi." Maul's face darkens. "I fear nothing." To that, Sidious lets out a loud cackling laugh that echoes throughout the entire hangar. "Perhaps we should find out how true that is," Palpatine says, as he quickly frees a saber from the sleeve of his robe and ignites it. Maul just as quickly grabs and ignites one end of his double-bladed saber and blocks Sidious's first attack. "We come to it at last," Sidious says. "Your final lesson, my apprentice." Maul draws back and ignites his second blade, to which Sidious frees a second saber from his other sleeve and ignites it. Maul then says, "I have only ever served you, master." Sidious smiles from ear to ear. "And that is where you have failed." Maul then looks confused, and Sidious explains, "From the very first moment I became an apprentice to my old master, I began to plan the day I would destroy him, and yet here you are, my loyal apprentice. Such a disappointment." Sidious then attacks, a gleeful smile upon his face as he does, and once again he cackles madly as he makes quick, serpent-like attacks, which, all Maul can hope to do, is fend off as he is continually pushed back, until he is driven all the way back to the open hangar bay doors, and the edge of a very, very long drop. Maul, tired and breathing heavily, then deactivates his sabers and begs for mercy, but Sidious only laughs one more time and says, "Mercy? You have failed this lesson, Lord Maul, for only the fearful beg for mercy." Sidious then slices Maul across the stomach and force pushes him off the edge. We now switch scenes and see Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon slowly walking through the corridors of the Jedi Temple, and hear Obi-Wan say, "I'm not so sure about this anymore, Master." Qui-Gon gives a small grin. "I felt the same way once, but rest assured, you are ready to face the trials." We see Obi-Wan give a slight frown before he hesitantly says, This is about the boy Anakin, isn't it? I've heard you are indeed being allowed to take him on as your new apprentice." Qui-Gon nods. "It is the will of the Force." There is a long silence before Obi-Wan then says, I'm not sure this is my path anymore." Qui-Gon seems confused and replies, "I thought you said you were going to the archives." Obi-Wan gives a slight chuckle and then manages to say, "I meant about becoming a Jedi. I'm not sure it's my path anymore." It takes a moment for Qui-Gon to register that, and when he does, he instantly stops and turns towards Obi-Wan. What are you saying? Obi-Wan offers him an apologetic smile. I am sorry, Master, but this is something I've been thinking a lot about. Qui-Gon gives him a knowing look and says, You mean something you've been thinking a lot about since we left Mandalore, and our mission to protect the young Duchess Satine ended. Obi-Wan looks away and gives a slight shrug before nodding. Qui-Gon then continues, I knew you two grew very close in that time, but apparently I failed to see just how close. Obi-Wan again looks at Qui-Gon and says, I love her, and I have even asked her to marry me. Qui-Gon looks completely taken aback and says as a truly joyous smile forms on his face, Apparently I very much missed how close you two had become, and I trust she said yes? Obi-Wan smiles. She thought I was crazy at first, but she did eventually say yes when she realized I was serious. But she then quickly pointed out there are going to be problems, not the least of which is I am not a Mandalorian, and the mistrust of the Jedi still runs high amongst them. But maybe this will be an opportunity to create some trust between the Jedi and the Mandalorians. I may not be a Jedi, or ever become one, but at least these years of training you wasted on me may still be of some good if I can help relations between the Council and the Mandalorians. Qui-Gon then quickly says, No, Obi-Wan, not a moment of your training was wasted, not if it was what ultimately led you to your true place and purpose. Obi-Wan seems surprised and asks, Then you're not angry? Qui-Gon shakes his head. Angry? No, Obi-Wan. I have never been prouder of you. The two then begin to walk again, and after a bit of congratulating, Qui-Gon then asks, Just answer me this one question. Your decision to leave the Order and be with Satine, did it have anything to do with Anakin and my decision to train him? There is the briefest hesitation before Obi-Wan simply says, No, Master, of course not. We now jump ahead in time 3 years, and we get a shot of the war-ravaged landscape of the planet Mandalore, and in the distance, we can see a massive enclosed city. And soon enough, we're inside that city and see Obi-Wan and Satine standing together on the balcony of a tall, eloquent-looking building and looking out at a bustling city. We hear as the two reminisce about how they met, about how the Jedi Council sent Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon to protect the young Duchess when she came into power because of how she wanted to put an end to Mandalore's more traditional warrior ways in favor of a new, more peaceful age. They talk about how the three of them went into hiding for over a year, being pursued by bounty hunters the whole time, and how this is when they fell in love. When the two are done reminiscing, they go inside and we see that the Holo News is on, and a reporter is talking about how there were more protests today, some of which turned violent, objecting to the recent marriage of the Duchess Satine to the former Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi, and objections to the soon-to-be-arriving Jedi ambassador from the Republic, who will begin negotiations that may see Mandalore one day join the Republic. The reporter also says that some groups, and their numbers are growing daily, favor a return to their warrior heritage, and continuing to stand alone in the galaxy, fearing what becoming a part of the Republic would mean for Mandalore. That's when Satine, with a frown on her face, shuts the Holo News off and says to Obi-Wan, The people will learn to love you as I have. Just give them time. Obi-Wan gives her an empty smile and then says, I can only imagine what those people will say when they find out you're pregnant. Satine's hands go to her stomach, and there is the slightest hint of fear on her face as she says, They will find out soon enough, and when they do. Satine's voice drifts off, and Obi-Wan finishes, I will do whatever I must to protect the both of you. Satine shakes her head to that. No, Obi-Wan, you agreed to never again resort to violence. That was the promise you made to me when I agreed to marry you, and you will hold to that promise no matter what. You will leave the Jedi ways and that lightsaber of yours in the past. Obi-Wan seems to want to say something, but only nods. Satine then asks, Do you regret it, your decision to leave the Jedi Order to be with me in all of this madness? Obi-Wan gives a small grin and a shake of the head. No, I am where I belong. And speaking of where I belong, if I don't leave now, I will be late for greeting Qui-Gon. Satine quickly corrects him and says, You mean we will be late? Obi-Wan shakes his head. Perhaps I should go alone. What with all the protests? Satine shakes her head firmly. That is why I must go, she explains. Now is not the time to show fear, my love. Now is the time for the people to understand that Mandalore can no longer act like It is alone in this galaxy. We must begin negotiations with the Republic and the Jedi. It is the only way to guarantee a future of peace and stability for all Mandalorians. We now switch scenes and get a shot of a Republic cruiser as it comes out of hyperspace and begins to approach the planet Mandalore. We're then in the cruiser with Qui-Gon and an almost teenage Anakin, and Qui-Gon says to him, "I haven't sensed you this nervous since your very first mission." Anakin smirks and says, "Sorry, Master, it's just that I used to hear so many stories on Tatooine about Mandalore and its people." Qui-Gon nods in understanding. "The frightening part is, most were probably true stories, but they spoke of the Mandalore of old. Satine has already changed much in her short time as Duchess." Anakin nods, but asks, "And all the people, they're just going along with all these changes? They're happy about it?" Qui-Gon replies, "Well, there are some who fear what will happen to Mandalore now that they are becoming weak as they see it. So be on your guard, Anakin. Though I do not sense any impending danger, I have been wrong before." He finishes with a little smirk, one which Anakin returns before giving one firm nod of the head in understanding. We're then back on Mandalore, at a landing pad at the edge of the enclosed city, where a crowd of protesters have gathered, as Satine, Obi-Wan, and several guards stand upon an open transport and watch as the Republic cruiser makes its landing. Obi-Wan then glances around at the angry crowd and tells Satine that perhaps she should wait here while he goes and greets Qui-Gon, to which Satine reluctantly agrees. We then watch as the cruiser touches down and a ramp lowers, and we see Qui-Gon, with Anakin behind him, walking down that ramp and smiling at his old friend Obi-Wan, who approaches the ramp also grinning. It is then that we see, pushing their way through the crowd, someone dressed in full blue and gray Mandalorian armor, and when they reach the front of the crowd, which is almost a stone's throw away from the cruiser, we see them bend over and point a rocket that they have on their back at the ramp of the Republic cruiser, and right at Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, who are embracing as old friends. The rocket then fires, and it is Anakin, not Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan, who are distracted, who first notices it, and before it hits all of them, Anakin stretches out with the Force and can do little more than deflect the rocket and alter its trajectory, and he unintentionally sends it flying right into the transport where Satine and her guards are. For one horrified moment, Obi-Wan stands paralyzed as he sees the transport explode into flames, and as the crowd start to panic and flee, Qui-Gon scans them and sees the Mandalorian warrior and makes a mad dash for them, but the warrior immediately activates their jetpack to fly away. Qui-Gon, however, uses the Force to take a hold of them and begins to pull them back down, to which the warrior responds by firing at Qui-Gon with their blaster, which forces Qui-Gon to let go of them, quickly activate his saber, and deflect the well-aimed bolts, thus allowing the Mandalorian to get away. We then see Obi-Wan, who without hesitation runs through the flaming debris and reaches Satine, but when he gets to her, he finds that she is already gone, and he falls to his knees next to her, cradles her body in his arms, and screams out in agony. And when the scream finally ends, he turns his head and his gaze falls upon Anakin, who stands at the edge of the flaming debris field, looking helpless and confused. And as Obi-Wan stares at him, we see the anger upon his face, and the reflection of the fire all around him burning in his eyes. And that is where this part ends. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of the first part of the story and what you think might come next. So leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.